Is it on? Okay. Hey everybody! I'm super psyched to let you guys know that I have finally finished Midnight Sun. It only took me like 2 weeks, but for me that's forever because I'm still 6 books behind on my reading challenge on Goodreads. But I had to read this book as soon as I got it because it's Stephenie Meyer. I had to. As a closet Twilight fan, not even really a closet Twilight fan, just a Twilight fan, I could not believe she finally came out with this book. I pre-ordered it, and I pre-ordered the signed copy because I have no self-control, and it's beautiful. Her signature is beautiful. Wait, yeah. The cover is gorgeous too. I really like the thing they got going with the pomegranate. I think they were a little obvious in their explanation of that. You hear it like 3 different times in the book. Edward kind of like hints at it. It's not even a hint. He just says it. The other books I felt like were more quiet about it. Each of the things in the covers, you kind of had to guess it. So where to begin with Midnight Sun? I have a lot of thoughts on this book. It was 660 pages, so obviously there's a lot of room for thoughts there. We'll talk about the overarching stuff for this non-spoiler section. I should start with the pros, just so you guys know I don't hate the book. It would be hard for me to hate something that Stephenie Meyer wrote. I was a fan of hers even when everyone was complaining about her writing in the Twilight books. The stories are great, and I will never diss those books. You can't make me. So in Midnight Sun, first of all, her writing gets exponentially better in this book. For those of you that haven't read The Host, she does actually write differently than she does in Twilight. Twilight is pretty, it was her first book, first of all, and then second of all, these are for, I feel like, an older audience. I feel like Midnight Sun was written for those of us that have kind of grown up. So the writing is beautiful. Lots of deeper thoughts and a smoother flow of the storyline. Everything is put together really well and makes sense. The coolest part about this book to me was finally seeing Edward's mind reading and how it worked. It was super cool to see the mental block that he gets from Bella the first time he sees her and how absurd that is to him after 90 whatever years of being able to read everyone's thoughts. It's like not being able to hear someone speak. It's like a whole new plane for him. He thinks that there's something wrong with him at first, like his power is waning. And it's super funny to see all the theories that he shoots through his head just in that first initial scene. This book gives an awesome explanation of Edward's whereabouts when he's not with Bella, especially towards the end of the book when she's being hunted by the tracker and she goes off with Alice and Jasper. I don't know if these are spoilers. I'm going to assume you guys have read or seen Twilight, so you know kind of the things that happen from that point of view. But you see all the things that goes on with him and Carlisle and everybody during those scenes. You see way more flashbacks to when he was a young vampire, to when Carlisle was a young vampire. You hear way more about Carlisle, which I super appreciate because Carlisle is my favorite. You really get a more full understanding of Edward's personality. I hadn't noticed it the first time I read Twilight, but when I read it the second time, because I did read Twilight and Midnight Sun back to back, when I read it the second time through, I did notice that Edward is super moody and a little aggressive sometimes towards Bella, and it kind of creeps me out. I don't know why I didn't notice that when I was 10, but you kind of get an understanding of why in this book. Not that it's completely excusable, but it makes sense after all he's been through and all the things that he's going through in the moment and his exhaustive explanation of how much he hates himself. Which brings me to the cons of this book. So like I said, I read Twilight and Midnight Sun back to back because I thought it'd be a cool way to get the story from both points of view and get it back to back so that I can be like, oh yes, that scene, that makes more sense. I do not recommend this. It was actually awful. It actually made Midnight Sun not fun. If you're going to read Midnight Sun, read it a while after you read Twilight. Or like if you haven't read any of them, you want to read them all through, read them all the way through to Breaking Dawn and then come back and read Midnight Sun. Don't read it after Twilight. Don't. Because basically what you're doing is you're going through the same story for the most part. Probably about 80% of the book is still very similar, if not the same scenes as we're going through in Twilight, but from Edward's perspective. And the difference is you get a whole lot of Edward's thoughts. You get a whole lot of the thoughts of everyone going on around him, especially Alice's visions. He sees those as they happen. And it's really cool, but it's also really frustrating because we're in the scene and it's a 2-minute conversation that they're having and it takes 60 pages because Edward has all these thoughts going through his head. And probably 70% of his thoughts are either I hate myself, I love Bella. I want to kill Bella, but I hate myself, but I love Bella, but I hate myself, and I love Bella, but I want to kill her. Oh my gosh. It's incessant. And that wouldn't be as bad if it wasn't for the fact that I had just read those scenes. And so I was like, come on over, just go through the scene. Just say what you're going to say. We all know what you're going to say. We all know what's going to happen. We all know how it's going to end. It was just really frustrating. Definitely a slower read than Twilight. I should have gone into it knowing that, but after reading them back to back, it's slow. That's going to take me out of the non-spoilery section of this video. If you want to watch the rest, please read Midnight Sun first, because I'm going to spoil a lot of stuff in just a second. I'll give you just a second to leave. Okay, so we start and end in the same places that we start and end in Twilight. There's no difference there. But as we go throughout the story, every time that he's not with Bella, the scenes get a lot more detailed, and you see everything that he's going through, you see everything his family is going through. I really, really like that we get to see his family more in this book. My biggest issues, honestly, were Edward and Alice's abilities were played up a lot more. And I don't know if I just didn't catch it the first time through, but I don't feel like they were as good at their abilities in the original Twilight books. If you hear Kenneth in the background, he's playing D&D right now. Oh my god, it's gonna distract me. Edward can hear the thoughts of everyone around him, and he seems to be paying attention to multiple storylines at a time. He's paying attention to this person and what this person sees at all times. So he watches Bella's face through the minds of all the other students when he's not with her, which is cool, but also like it sounded like a lot of work and a lot of mental strain on his part, but he seems unfazed by it, which I know, vampire thing, maybe it's not that hard for him, but it didn't feel realistic sometimes. And the whole not being able to hear Bella's thoughts thing was kind of put off for me, because a lot of times he would guess them anyways. But he keeps complaining about not being able to understand what she's thinking. So what's wrong? And so that kind of threw me off. But then as they got closer and as the relationship grew, it got harder and harder. She's an enigma. You can't really guess her thoughts ever, especially toward the end when she goes off with James and all that. And then Alice's visions were overdone, I feel like, a lot in this. So in the movies, her visions are super sporadic, and they control her more than she controls them. They come to her all of a sudden, and she sees what she can, but she can't really choose all the time what she sees. In the original books, she can, but it's still very subjective, and it's still very hard for her to concentrate on one person's future. In this book, she seems practically omnipresent. She is following everybody all the time, and she's running through 100 different scenarios in her head in every scene to make sure that they do the one that's correct. Especially towards the end when they're trying to hunt the hunter. She's following them like 30 minutes in the future all the time. And all of them. She knows everything all of them are going to do 100 different times over. And somehow this is just something she's mastered. But if she's this good at it, why do we get in all these situations in the first place? And what about all the situations in the next 3 books that we get into and Alice doesn't see him coming? If she sees this much stuff, like we're seeing her see in this book, because Edward can read her thoughts, so he sees the visions with her all the time. And she's almost always right. I'm so confused. I mean, I think it's freaking awesome because I love Alice, but I felt like it was a little too unrealistic of an ability for her to be able to see that much all the time and to be able to control what she sees and plan ahead based on whatever the best of 100 different scenarios is. I don't know, it's just an issue I have with it. But honestly, overall, this book was really fun, and it was super, super, super cool to see all the family stories more. You see a lot of Carlisle compared to the original books, and I always wanted to see more of Carlisle, so that was great. You get to see a lot of Edward and his background and a lot of the things that he went through. A little more specifics on when he went off and became a murdery vampire for a bit, but he murdered murderers, so it's fine. I feel a little more for Edward now, because when he's grumpy or when he's upset and stuff, you see a lot of the behind the scenes of why that is. And his infatuation with Bella is a lot cuter in this. It doesn't feel so stalkery, which people complain about in the Twilight book. It feels more endearing. I really like when he follows Bella to the hospital. He follows Bella to the hospital after the scene with the van, when he stops the van for her, and he goes to see Carlisle in his office when she gets there. Just the line where he's like, please, I'm so afraid I hurt her, is so cute. And you get to see a little more humor in this book too. He's not all serious and darkness, although his thoughts are an exhaustive explanation of why he feels like he's a monster and hates himself. He still has a little bit of humor in there, and it's really cute. Like this one scene where he's talking about going to find her to make sure that she's all right before they even really become a thing. And he says, it has me yearning to ditch school too in order to go find the girl again. Like a stalker. An obsessed stalker. An obsessed vampire stalker. And then when he sees Mike helping her out of class in biology, when she sees the blood and she starts to feel faint, and it says as soon as he saw Mike with her, he nearly took the door off his car. Oh, we get to find out what Edward does about those guys that tried to hurt Bella in Port Angeles. Literally, I thought that they just had to leave and just had to leave that guy out there. And Edward's thinking about it in his head during the scene when he's telling her to distract him so he doesn't go back and kill them. I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, oh, he really just should. This guy is obviously going to kill other girls. And he's seen his head. He's seen that he's already killed people. And then they just leave. And then it comes back and he asks Carlisle to help him. Of course, being the always benevolent, kind Carlisle, finds a way to do it in a way that's not killing the guy. He finds him in a bar and sedates him and takes him to the police station and just like leaves him in a ditch by the police station. He's been wanted in several states, so they immediately like take him in. Carlisle is just so passionate about it. He's like, it's okay, I'm gonna make everybody safe. He's such a good man. It's interesting to see them fight the whole book long with Alice's visions for Bella's future, because they talk so much about how she sees one of two ways. Either Bella dies or Bella becomes a vampire. And this is like an existential crisis that they're following the entire book. Like Edward is always thinking about it in the back of his head. And that's fine, but I don't know why we need to think it with him all the time. Maybe that was my issue with his thought process in the book, because he's always thinking about how he's going to either kill Bella or turn her, and he doesn't want either of those options. And you know, as a Twilight reader, you know what's going to happen. So dwelling on this is oddly frustrating. It makes sense for him to be that upset about it and that worried about which possibility is going to win. But at the same time, you're like, I know, Stephanie, I know. We found that out 10 years ago. Oh, did you notice the change in the scene when they were in the car and he asked her what she is listening to and she says Linkin Park, Hybrid Theory? That's my favorite album by Linkin Park. I read this and I was like, there's no way I missed this in Twilight. There's no way I read Twilight twice and didn't see that either time. And so I went back and got the Twilight book and I brought it out and it just says, I said the name of the band. It doesn't say the name of the band, it just says to you that she said the name of the band. And I was like, that's odd that she would just skip that over in when she first read the books. But I really like that she replaced it with a good band. I approve of this message. And then he asks her favorite movies and she mentions Monty Python and the Holy Grail. That couldn't have been in Twilight either, because I would have remembered. The sweetest Carlisle scene in this book is when Edward thinks back to his first year as a vampire, and Carlisle, he's so kind and endearing. I was tearing up the whole time when he sets up that Christmas for him and sends him out on his first trip out alone with humans to see how he does. And he comes back and he says, Merry Christmas, Edward. It's so sweet. Carlisle also is interesting in the way he tries to make sure the family understands the depths of what becoming a real vampire actually is. He makes them attend the funerals of their victims if they kill a human. I thought that was really interesting. And I wonder if that means Rosalie's victims, they had to attend their funerals, because they kind of deserved it. Did you notice the part where Jacob's in the house with them when he and his dad come to confront Charlie and Bella? Jacob says, something's gone rancid in here. He says it in his mind. He doesn't say it out loud, so we didn't hear about it in the Twilight book. But he smells Edward. He's not a werewolf yet, but I guess his coming of age is getting him there, or just Edward's presence brings it up. But he says that there, and then at the prom at the end of the book, he says something about the smell again, like he thinks Bella's wearing like bad perfume or something, and it's actually just that Edward is nearby, but nobody knows what's going on. Even Edward has no clue why Jacob is thinking that. I also really thought the scene was cool where it flashed back to when Carlisle first calls Billy and says that they're coming back to town. And at the time, Billy is enough generations out where he doesn't know if the clones are actually a legitimate thing or if they're ever coming back. And just that tense conversation that he had where they both know that they hate each other, but they both know that they can't do anything about it. And they both know that they have to allow the other to be there. It was just super tense to read. I wanted to see it in a movie. I seriously enjoy the humor in this book. It's few and far between, but when you catch it, it's great. Like when they're in the middle of the intense chase after the tracker, and they're in the middle of Canada or wherever, and Carlisle is checking in on Bella and Alice and Jasper, and he's explaining to Alice. He says Bella needs to eat at least 3 times every 24-hour period, and hydration is very important. You should have water on hand at all times. Ideally 8 hours of sleep per night. Like, the fact they have to say this to people is so hilarious to me. I remember them bringing up in the movies a couple times where they had to learn how to make food for her, but just like having to explain it like that, like it's like a pet. The scene that was the coolest was when they were in the car, when they were in Arizona, and they were trying to get to Bella as fast as they could. And he wipes out the mirrors, asks for Jasper and Emmett to look back. And then Alice is looking forward, and she's thinking of all the future. And so he literally is seeing in 360 degrees around the car because he could see their thoughts. And he's seeing several minutes, if not hours, into their future at the same time that he's seeing the present. And Jasper is using his ability to get everybody in their like war mood. And so the combination of those 3 abilities on top of just the regular vampire senses of being able to see everything and fast forward was the coolest scene. She did fantastic writing these action sequences at the end. I honestly, the first half of the book, I was really struggling. I really was. That was what took me most of my reading time. I read the last 150 pages in one sitting today because once the chase starts, it's crazy. They are doing so much to try to keep Bella safe, and none of it works. None of it. And it's chaos the whole time. It was so much fun to read the last 150 pages. Let me tell you, it made up for the rest of the book for sure. Not that the rest of the book was bad. Like I said, the writing is incredible. The pacing is great. It's a slower read than Twilight. Know that. And know that if you read Twilight and this back to back, it's gonna be a lot harder. But those are all my thoughts on the book. I thought it was great. I think Stephenie Meyer has been great in every book I've read by her. But I think some of Edward's thoughts could have been cut down about the whole hating himself, loving Bella thing. And I think some of the abilities stuff could have been toned down with Alice and Edward as far as them being able to see all things at all times and see things in advance. It was a little, I think, just a little bit overdone. But other than those 2 things, this is a really good book, and I put it probably second best out of all that Stephenie has wrote. I still think The Host is the best thing that Stephenie's wrote. I haven't read The Chemist yet, though, so I am reading that soon, and I'll let you know how that goes. What did you guys think of this book? Let me know in the comments below. I want to know if anyone else struggled alongside me with all the Edward's thoughts things. And I want to know if anybody else enjoyed the end as much as I did. And let me know in the comments what you want to hear about most. I'm still planning what I want to read next in October and November. So any suggestions would be highly appreciated. My TBR list is incredibly long, but being able to narrow it down would be cool as well. Thank you all for being here. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye! Look at that. Look. Oh, yeah. What?